I'm Dr. John Zeisel. I believe that staying engaged in our communities, that continuing to learn, and that knowing we can make a difference, hope, are the secrets of successful aging. Welcome to Hopeful Aging. The mission of this program is to create a life worth living for all of us as we age, including those facing cognitive challenges, by enriching life and offering hope. My guest today is a professor of neurology at Harvard Medical School, vice chair of neurology at Mass General Hospital, and was selected last year, I think it was, as one of the 100 most influential people, not only in the United States, but in the world. And his world renown includes being the author with Deepak Chopra of the international bestseller, Super Genes. So the subheading of Super Genes, Rudy, is unlock the astonishing power of your DNA for optimum health and well-being. That's a mouthful, and that's what we're going to talk about today through the whole half hour.
It took a long time to come up with that subtitle. So.
I'm sure it did. Now, you in the book, and I want to start with a few definitions, because you use the word genes, and we've all heard, oh, it's in his genes, it's in her genes. Gene expression, which not often said.
Right.
We've heard about DNA, but what is DNA when you're talking about genes? And you use a term called epigenetics. So here are 4 terms: genes, gene expression, DNA, and epigenetics. Briefly, can you tell our audience what does these things mean?
Yeah. So DNA is a chemical. It's in the center of every cell in your body, in the nucleus. And it is what is the blueprint for all the proteins that, together with fat and water, make up your body. And it's also the historical record of all life on this planet, because our DNA is 60% identical to the DNA in a potato. So it's a continuum, and the DNA keeps organizing and evolving further and further.
So you could say it's the memory of the cell.
Memory and the blueprints, the program of hundreds of thousands of proteins which make our body together with fat and water.
Great.
That's the way to think about it. Now, the chemical itself is made up of what are called bases. They're like letters, A, C, T, and G. There are 3 billion of them.
That's
that
a
you
lot.
Get 3 billion from mom, 3 billion from dad. And if so picture now how they are. If you take a ladder in your hands, like a little miniature ladder from a dollhouse, and then twist it into a helix. Each rung on the ladder is a base or a letter. And then picture 3 billion of them. They're sussed out.
Before you go on, that's all in a gene.
That's no genes. We didn't get to genes yet.
We're
This
not
is
even
just
genes
DNA.
yet. Okay.
So now you get your twisty ladder, 3 billion rungs, and now carve that up into 23 sections.
Right.
And those are the chromosomes.
Got it.
And then on the chromosomes, sections of these letters are genes. But here's the thing that people don't know. Only 3% of your DNA is genes. The other 97% we used to call junk DNA because we didn't know what it did. Now we realize that the stuff in between the genes is regulating the activity of the genes, whether they're turning on or off or up or down and making the proteins. And that activity of the gene is called gene expression.
Wow, got it.
Okay, so that's, and epigenetics is such that, everything you do in life, your genes are turning on and off, up and down, and most of those changes are transient. They just come and go. But if you have certain habits or routines that you do all the time, whether they're good or bad, the genes get programmed semi-permanently where the actual DNA, picture the ladder and something attaches to the ladder, the DNA gets chemically modified. So now you get programs of genes turning on and off, up and down all the time, even when you don't know it. And they're now programming your body automatically, all based on your lifestyle choices and habits. That process is what we call epigenetics.
Wow.
And it's relatively new. And that's what we write about in the book.
I see. My work in this program is about non-pharmacologic approaches, including lifestyle and things like that. And we know that things like eating well, for example, is good for you, but we never knew why exactly. And what you're saying is, it's not just in our genes, we can control something, we can make a difference to our genes. That's hope. Hope for us is being able to make a difference.
Right.
And so what you're saying is there are things we can do to make a difference. So what are some of the links between positive lifestyle and this turning on our genes that you write about in the book or that you promote?
Right. So I think that in super genes, we're getting to the very basis, readdressing the question of nature versus nurture. How much of us are programmed by our genes where there's nothing we can do about it? Look at your family history, look at mom and dad, look at your grandparents, you're stuck with that. That's the nature side. The nurture side says, well, wait a minute, with your choices and how you live your life, you can affect your health, you can affect your behavior, even your habits.
Yes.
So, as what we've learned over the last few decades is that in the vast majority of cases, among the different variations of genes you can inherit from mom and dad, in 95% of the time, you are in control.
95% of the time, what I do can turn on and off my genes?
Yeah, in terms of so between your DNA and my DNA on those 3 billion bases, we have 3 million differences.
Right.
Okay? Between any two people, 3 million. One of those bases might guarantee you get Alzheimer's by 50 years old. That's the first Alzheimer's genes I found in the 80s and 90s were genes that guaranteed Alzheimer's by 50 years old.
So they're on all the time?
Yeah, but if you ask how many of these mutations are dramatically, which we call fully penetrant, meaning the variation in the gene guarantees you a disease or guarantees you'll be an alcoholic, right? Versus just as affecting your susceptibility or predisposition, but there's something you can do about it with your lifestyle. 95% of the time you can do something about it. Only 2 to 5% of the time is the genetics unchangeable.
Right, so the hope is in those 95%.
And that's the basis of super genes to say, here's how it works, here's how your lifestyle choices from diet, exercise, stress level, sleep, etc., is affecting the activity of your genes, or what we call gene expression. And because of epigenetics, the key thing you have to remember is that your habits and routines matter most, because that's what programs your genes for good.
Wow. So a friend of my son's wrote a book called The Sports Gene. And it's sort of the same kind of stuff, but he doesn't go into the epigenetics. But what you're saying is one explanatory factor of why a whole culture is so good at long-distance running is the generations have been doing it. So they've been programming and turning on those genes all the time.
The vast majority of our sports stars do not have the sports genes, the sports gene. I mean, they did it with hard work.
Well, but what he's saying in this book and what you're saying here is it's not a gene called the exercise gene or the meditation gene or the sleep gene, but if you do these things well, if you change your lifestyle, you can influence the genes.
Right, that's right.
And so by doing it over and over, they're influencing their own genes.
Right. When any way you train yourself, whether it's to avoid fast food and McDonald's and avoid processed foods and go more toward healthy organic foods, or whether it's to get into an exercise regimen, right?
I do want to interrupt. No, but I do want to interrupt. What are the big 6? And give me a few examples, because you're starting to go into this. What are the big 6 things that you recommend in the book to change in lifestyle or modify or focus on?
So what we did was we looked at the last 5 years of published data, scientific papers in high-impact science journals, to ask how do the various ways in which we live our lives affect our gene expression or activity. And we looked, a lot of these studies were done in mice, okay? Because you actually have to look at the genes themselves, and it's hard to go do that in a human. And we said, based on all that literature, what are the big categories of our lifestyle and the choices we make that directly affect your gene expression and your health, where you're in charge?
What are the big 6?
So we talk about diet. Processed foods, just bad. Almost like smoking cigarettes.
Wow.
Too much red meat, bad. The best thing you can do is a Mediterranean diet. Where I'm personally vegetarian. But so I get my protein from other
like beans and tofu.
Beans, tofu once a week. There's also some mushroom-based products. Once you have to learn how to be a vegetarian in order to eat well. Because it's not easy.
Because diet doesn't mean don't. It means organize what you're putting in your face. You
are what you eat. Okay.
I got you. So diet is one of the big 6.
So Mediterranean. So if you look up Mediterranean diet, there's plenty of literature on it. It's on the web. That's been shown to reduce risk for Alzheimer's, heart disease, just about anything you worry about as you get older. Okay. Exercise. Exercise is vastly important because during exercise you actually stimulate the birth of new nerve cells in your brain. So people think, oh, you're born to think. I mean, you're raised to think you're stuck with the brain cells you have. You don't make any more. It's not true.
Right.
And the very area of the brain that's affected in Alzheimer's disease, which is for short-term memory initially,
Sure.
You can grow new nerve cells.
Great.
And exercise induces them.
Gotcha.
Exercise not only induces new nerve cells to be born in the brain, but cleans up the area where they're going to be born so they can be raised in a good neighborhood.
Huh.
So this is,
so second one is exercise.
yeah, and if you you don't have to go running. I mean, just aim at, if you have a watch or a Fitbit or something, aim for 10,000 steps per day. Be happy with 8,000. Don't be happy with 6,000. That's the rule I follow.
Got
Very
it.
simple. So then we have, the next would be a combination, stress, emotion, and meditation. These are all linked together.
They really
So
are.
managing stress, managing emotional IQ, and working meditation into your life, okay? Stress is the biggest killer we have. Stress causes inflammation.
Yes.
Stress can cause memory loss that even mimics Alzheimer's disease. And a lot of stress comes from one word, expectation.
Huh.
Okay, all too often, we're expecting too much of ourselves. We're expecting too much of others. Expectation leads to anxiety. If someone falls short, who's a friend, you expected more, there's discouragement that can lead to depression and despair.
I get a word a day, and at the bottom of a word a day, they have a thought a day. And recently, I read, it's always quoted by somebody famous, I don't remember who it was, and it was, give up on the life you planned and accept the life you have.
I mean,
you know, that's the expectation.
Yeah,
if you go, my life was going to be like this, and you don't have it, all it does is create stress. But
right.
if you go, I'm here now, this is what I'm doing,
right.
this is the way life is, it reduces the stress.
And people sometimes, push back on it and they say, well, if I just go with the flow, I'm like a leaf blown in the wind. Where's my ambition? Where's my career? And the thing to think about is always live in the present.
Yes.
But while you're living in the present, you can still learn from the past and plan for the future. The mistake is to dwell on the past, leading to obsession and perhaps depression. The mistake is to try to live in the future where you're not there yet, and the consequence can be anxiety and fear. So if you're in the present, but you're still recapitulating the past to plan for the future, then you can take all three together and still live a very fruitful life while living in the moment.
So my meditation practice is based on the teachings of a Zen Buddhist priest called Thich Nhat Hanh.
Of course, yeah. I've met him.
And, well, he's no longer doing any of the sessions and the retreats, but I've done all the last 10 years retreats with him. And he basically says, the present is all we got because the past is like a movie you're playing. You can be sad about it, but it's a movie. And the future is a movie we're playing in our brain. We can't live in movies. We got to live in what we got.
And
so everything you're saying fits right into it.
And related to genetics, he did a wonderful interview. It's online with Deepak Chopra, my co-author, where he talked about the entire history of the planet being in genes, and he's drawing a circle with his finger saying, I'm thanking my parents for their genes. I'm thanking my grandparents. Then he goes back to, I'm thanking the bacteria that first lived on Earth for the first genes that came about. And he's thanking the entire genetic traces of our lives going back really, millions and millions of years.
So the epigenetics is in that circle. I have a circle drawn by him on my wall over my office.
Perfect.
A large one.
Same idea,
No, but it's him. And that's what it means. So you talked about food, stress reduction, exercise. You didn't mention sleep, and I know that sleep is where we take our thoughts and they get together and congeal.
I'm still on stress because that's important, because we didn't get to meditation.
Okay.
So stress, managing emotions, and a practice that's absolutely essential, I think, these days is meditation. Because you don't have to do anything special to meditate. You don't need lotus position. Just sit in a chair with your spine straight, close your eyes, and just focus on your breath in, coming down the spine to the back, and then your breath coming, so you're coming up the spine with the breath in, and then the breath out down the front. Just practice focusing on your breath and clearing your mind at least 2 times a day. Aim for 10 to 20 minutes. What we found is that we have a study that's going to be published soon, where we looked at gene expression. We looked at epigenetics, at the effects of a meditation clinical trial for 1 week, and the results blew us away. If you look at the gene activities that change with 1 week of meditation twice a day, genes for inflammation. Inflammation is the biggest killer in the body, and stress can cause that, obesity can cause that. Genes involved with wound healing and the immune system, everything was so beneficial that we couldn't have written a script like this in terms of what we saw with the effects of meditation.
Okay, so the reason I'm going forward on this is that you have a whole bunch of other things you recommend in the book.
But that's a big one.
No, I do got that. No, and it's important for everybody, and I think the big 6 that you mentioned were...
and then sleep.
And then there's sleep.
So we already covered 5 because we covered the diet, exercise, and meditation, emotion, and stress, which are all related. And the last is sleep. And I would say sleep has never been so important based on what we've learned about sleep. It used to be, and I was guilty of this, oh yeah, I can live on 4 or 5 hours of sleep. I don't need much sleep. I get 4 or 5 hours, I take a power nap during the day. And now we know that that's almost like saying, yeah, I can smoke a half a pack of cigarettes a day, I'm fine. Same thing as saying that.
Right.
Or, oh no, I can eat McDonald's 4 times a week, that's fine, okay? The fact is, if you don't get enough sleep, your body is suffering. We now know, for example, in the brain, that it's during the deepest part of sleep, what's called slow wave delta sleep, that your brain actually constricts and cleans itself out of a lot of the protein debris and garbage, so to speak, that causes Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, and can even lead to stroke. I call deep sleep mental floss. It's when you clean your brain. And this is proven, top papers and top journals. The brain, we only realized last year that the brain has its own lymphatic system for cleaning itself out, and it does so during deep sleep. If you don't get enough sleep, you're not guaranteed the deep sleep you need to clean your brain. So you have to get 7 to 8 hours.
So those are the biggies. We got those down. The stress, the meditation, the sleep. You have a whole other program in here. And it's as important, I believe, from my experience. And the things you mention, it's on page 237 in your book, because I've read it carefully, are having a higher purpose. I'm going to go the whole list. Intimacy and communion with nature and other people. Openness to change, not being tied to what you know, but being responding to everything in the environment. Nurture and acceptance and equality and without judgment and prejudice. Creativity, feeling part of the rhythm of the universe. Not being struggling and fighting and trying to control things, feeling bond with the immortality of the self, and generosity.
Yes.
Now, it's
a lot.
No, it's a lot, but it's not the simple recommendation of sleep, exercise, food, which we've always known, but you're giving a reason why. My question is, if it's true that having a purpose in life, having meaning in life, create the mission of this program, to create a life worth living. That's meaning. Right. That's what these things are about. How do they work? And why are those important? And what do these have to do with genetics? How does being generous and give us and generosity is the reason for all abundance, those are your words, what does that have to do with the genes and science?
Yeah. So this all comes down to the lessons we can learn from one cell.
You mean to tell me
the wisdom
that those
of the cell.
9 things are in the cell?
Yes. So we call this the wisdom of the cell. So when we talked about that DNA, it's sitting in the center of a cell. The cell is constantly communicating with its DNA.
Wow.
The cell lives a perfect life. So what's a cell? A tiny little cell lives with other cells to create a tissue. Tissues then layer together to create an organ. Now you have a working organ like the stomach or the heart. Even your skin is the biggest organ of the body.
Right.
Okay? A cell is basically always living perfectly. It's in balance with the other cells in the tissue. It never takes more than it needs. It always serves the other cells in the organ and even other cells in the body through long-range signals as much as it serves itself. It's always aware, completely aware of the environment, and always doing exactly the right things in response to the signals from the environment. If we were to live like a cell, we'd have a utopia. But,
wow,
like a lot of science fiction movies have shown, utopias are not everything that you think they might be.
Sometimes they're a dystopia.
Right, well, because in a utopia, you may not necessarily have enough choice, free will, novelty, and creativity.
So it turns into a dystopia.
Right. So you want to live like a cell, which is perfect harmony and balance, not taking more than you need, serving others, generosity, all the things you just said, but bring upon that the human nature of making choices, having free will, wanting to have purpose, meaning, everything, this newest part of the brain right here. We wrote in our other book, Super Brain, about how to use your brain. And the frontal cortex of the brain is only 4 million years old. The brain stem, which is constantly trying to guide you around with base instincts, is 400 million years old.
So the 400 million year old one is flight and fright and fear.
Yeah, the four Fs, as we call them.
I got it. Right. And the front of the brain is reason and the stuff that we've evolved.
But more than reason, we say reason, but really it's meaning, purpose, self-awareness, and having choice and creativity, and especially wanting to serve society. So if you're just a cell, you're living perfectly, and you want to do that. But now superimpose upon that you want to actually give back to society. You want to be creative. Right. You want to be generous, but you also want to create new and evolve and emerge and have humankind evolve continually.
Okay. So you're painting a huge, magnificent picture, where the eat, sleep, exercise, that's your body. Now it's affecting your cells, and your cells affect your brain. And you're telling me that generosity and being part and being creative, and you're a creative person, I know, because you also play keyboard and have played keyboard with Aerosmith in a recent recording, and that you play with one of the
Chris Mann.
Chris Mann, who was on The Voice, right?
Right.
And one of the winners on The Voice. So that also impacts our brain, but that's not exercise. It's creativity. It's generosity. All these things. And you're telling me that both of these schools of thinking, the physical stuff, sleep, exercise, food, the I would call it not spiritual, but the meaningful part of life.
Meaning, purpose, yes.
Which has meaning and purpose and generosity. These come together
Right.
to really create cells that help your body
Right.
and keep you healthy.
So
you can't just do one or the other. You've got to do both to really do the best you can.
Right. So if we were to merge what we wrote in Super Brain previously with
Right.
Super Genes, we talk about the triune brain, right? So if you want to put the triune brain, you take your hand like this and fold it, right?
Wait a minute, I'm going to do this too.
Okay, do that,
Do
and I'll
this.
fold it over.
Okay.
This is the brain stem.
Right.
400 million years old, also called the reptilian brain.
Yes, I've heard
Right?
that.
Fight or flight, find food, and reproduce, the four
Right.
Fs, as we call them.
We
Okay?
got it.
Now you open it up. That's the limbic system. That's your short-term memory. That's what gets hit in Alzheimer's.
Right.
Only 100 million years old. This is where you have fear, desire, and short-term memories.
Right.
That's
Right.
100 million.
Yeah.
Now fold it. This is
Okay.
all the stuff in the front.
Yep.
Prefrontal, frontal cortex. Only 4 million years. This is where you have self-awareness, meaning, identity, purpose in
Yes.
life. So this is selfishness.
Yes.
Right? Just make sure there's drive so the species survives.
Yeah.
Food, fight or flight, get food,
Take care
reproduce.
of me and mine.
Right? This is where you have that fear and desire that's driving you all day, even subconsciously.
Right.
But this is where creativity, meaning, and purpose are. This is self-awareness. The vector of brain evolution has been from selfishness
Yes.
to self-awareness.
Yes.
With self-awareness comes a understanding that you're part of a whole, that you're
Right.
part of a community that you want to serve, just like that cell wants to serve the rest of the tissue.
And interestingly,
Okay.
So interestingly, when we talk about a life worth living, whether you're old with or without some cognitive issue, and as we age, most of us have some cognitive issue, we say let's give meaning. Let's find the meaning and the purpose and the
Yes,
community
absolutely.
context. Because if we can do that and find and connect you as an aging person or somebody with cognitive issues to those meaningful things in your life, we can overcome the fears and the angers that are caught
Right.
because of the problems in the limbic system. So you're really giving us a blueprint for therapy, and therapy, again, the mission, a life worth living, no matter where we are. And I think that's a very powerful blueprint.
And the thing is, it's not hard. There's a simple way to do it. Okay.
I'm sorry. I thought this was hard.
No, I'm going to tell you a very simple way to do it. You want to use all three parts of the brain.
Yes.
Right? This is the drive. I call this the 3D brain.
Okay.
This is the drive.
Right.
That says go, go, go.
I got it.
This is the desire
Right.
to want to succeed.
Yep.
And the fear of not succeeding, all stuck in here.
Right.
This is the dream.
Right.
This is the vision of the future of how the world and your life can be better.
And how
Drive, desire, and dream.
Right. And the dream includes what you can do to achieve that dream. Is
Now-
that right? If we're going, because that's where hope is.
That's right. Hope. Well, hope.
Well,
is
hope
kind of like
mean-
fear
no,
too.
no, I don't
Yeah.
mean hope. oh, I wish it's going to not rain tomorrow.
Right. That's fair.
I mean hope in you can make a difference.
Yes, that's right.
And if you know, if you have that dream and you can you can say, I can eat a little bit better so my dream is going to be healthier. I can sleep a little bit
exactly
better.
right.
I can get connected.
Yes.
That's hope in my terminology.
I think I'm writing my next book with you. That's exactly.
And this concept of hope comes from a Harvard professor named Marshall Gantz, who talks about the public narrative. And if we can create aging as a hopeful objective, as the big D of dreams, and figure out how people can get there.
And keep them healthy.
And keep them healthy.
Right.
Hey, isn't that what we want to get to?
Because the wisdom that you will get from the older members of our society is the best wisdom you can possibly have.
Absolutely.
So you need to keep the brain healthy.
Isn't that exciting?
And the 3D, the idea of the drive, desire, and dream, well, that's where the brain's evolving. And I said there's an easy way to do it.
Easy, I like that. Before you go on, the audience wants to know the easy, simple way to get here.
This is one word.
One word.
One word. Observe.
Observe.
Which means, and this was the main point in Superbrain, which was the prequel, so to speak, to Super Genes, which is that if you make an effort at every moment of the day to observe what your brain is doing, observe if you're experiencing fear, observe if you're experiencing desire, just take the time to use your frontal cortex of self-awareness to observe what those older parts of the brain are doing in terms of fear and desire and base instincts for food and fight or flight. The simple process of observing from the frontal cortex back to the limbic system and brainstem creates connection and balance. Success is all about connectivity in the brain and inducing connections from the newest parts, which are driving self-awareness, to the oldest parts, which are driving selfishness. But you need it all. You need the motivation and the dream together.
That's right.
And to connect the brain, it's very simple. Just take the time to say, I'm not really my brain. I'm the observer of what my brain is doing.
Yes.
In meditation, I'm the user of my brain. The brain's not using me. I'm observing where I am in my brain, and that's simple. Creates
and
connection.
In meditation, you were talking about breathing. Meditation teachers talk about observe the breath. They don't say control the breath, breathe a certain way.
Never control.
No, I know, but observe.
Control is useless.
So
we say resistance leads to persistence.
Resistance leads to persistence.
Yeah. When it comes to breaking bad habits or reprogramming, this incredibly dynamic neural network. You have 100 billion neurons. You have trillions of connections called synapses, or quadrillion. It's all about not trying to control. It's about rewiring. Don't resist. Rewire.
So you said the simple word is observe.
Observe. Observe to rewire.
So I was reading something recently, a lecture by Konrad Lorenz, who was an ethologist, a Nobel Prize-winning ethologist, was an animal observer, about the nature of science. And what he said is that we've fallen into a situation where quantification is the definition of science. And he said, traditionally, all science begins...
Right. Shut up and measure.
Right, shut up and measure. But all science, he says, begins with the fundamental human ability, actually of all animals, not only human, to perceive. And perception, he says, is the basis of it all. And that is observation. So it's a real simple thing. Use your innate skills of perception just to observe.
But observe yourself.
No, but he's talking about everything. Yourself, what's around you.
Observe everything.
Just perceive.
But you really have to emphasize observing yourself, taking advantage of your self-awareness to observe the self, which is being driven by your instincts and by your fears and desires. Because if you don't observe them, it's like a kid. If you want to control a little kid, you can't control a little kid, right? You observe a small child, and you try to set an example for that child in terms of how to behave. If you try to control a kid, resistance leads to persistence, right? Unless you want to use the heavy stick, which you don't want to do on yourself. So as your brain is constantly trying to delve into fears and desires that can drive you crazy, or your brain stem's trying to get you in trouble with fight or flight and finding food and taking things and reproduction, right? Simply by saying, I'm watching you, I'm watching what you're doing in here, I'm watching what you're doing down here with my new part of my brain, self-awareness, you create the connectivity
all
to do it
All I'm saying is that this simple observation, which everybody who's listening knows is not so simple, but it's what we got to do.
You just choose to do it.
I know that. You know that. It's every simple thing isn't that. It's that simple thing called observe is embedded in our fundamental ability.
Right.
And that's what this Nobel physicist, ethologist was talking about, which is, and people with cognitive issues or as we age, we never lose the ability to perceive.
Can I tell you my trick?
You can, and I got to say two other things, and then
All right, here's my trick. How do you observe what your brain is doing? Every time you take out your phone to check it, which we do all the time, or look at your Apple Watch if you have one, you tell yourself, if I'm going to do that, I'm also going to, now after I'm done, take the time to observe what my brain is doing. And you'll do it all the time.
I love it.
Because we do that all the time.
I got it.
That's a simple trick.
So it's a trick. It's sort of a cue to do that.
Right.
So there's two things. One is there anything in your life? How did you come to all this stuff? And we don't have a long time. So is there something in your life that got you to think so interestingly and creatively about things?
You know, I was brought up. My parents always emphasized in the house the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you have them do unto you. And my mom, to this day, she's 83, and she works at the senior center in Cranston, Rhode Island, and just gives herself every day. And she taught me long ago that love and service is what will keep you healthy and happy.
Right.
And it's the same message. But now there's the scientific backing, epigenetics, neuroplasticity, that says all the advice she gave me before that were just suggestions and recommendations. The science now says that they're not just recommendations, they're obligations if you want to live in a healthy way.
I'm going to repeat that for everybody. Okay. These things that we're talking about, whether it's food, whether it's eating well, whether it's sleeping well, whether it's giving of oneself, whether it's having meaning, are no longer recommendations, they're obligations to our bodies.
That's right.
Down to the cellular level.
That's right.
That's a very powerful message.
That's what the science says.
Right.
It's almost like if you're not trying to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep now, it's like smoking cigarettes. If you're sitting on the couch, not getting up and moving and eating potato chips, it's like sitting on the couch and eating potato chips. No, it's like smoking cigarettes. Right. Anyways, if you're not doing the things you need to do to have your health span keep up with your lifespan. See, this is what happened. Our lifespan has exceeded our health span because we're not taking time to do the right things. Now, epigenetics says, hey, here's a genetic basis for this. It works. This isn't just Mom saying what you should do. This is now what you have to do.
If you want to pay attention to your body, if you want to be healthy.
If you want to be healthy well into old age.
That's the important part. Exactly. If you want to be healthy and keep being healthy into old age, so you don't go, and we don't say, there's nothing I can do, old age is just genetic, old age is going to come. So
that's right.
First of all, we got here a wonderful interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
To me, what's fascinating about you and about your life, not only your work, is that you are a scientist, you are an artist, and I'm going to ask you actually to play a little something and demonstrate, because I know that you've written a song with Chris Mann, this guy from The Voice, called Remember Me, and I'm going to play that on the way out. But you're now a passionate advocate for healthy living. And I think that being those three things, a scientist, an artist, and a passionate advocate for healthy living, is pretty much an important thing to be in life and gives meaning to your life. And I want to thank you for sharing that with me and with the audience.
You're very welcome, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
A lot of fun.
Thank you all for joining us at Hopeful Aging. And I hope you come back again and listen to another inspiring talk by another expert. We'll see who's next. Bye-bye.